Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Serious, people who suffer from mental health disorders. What was your "this isn't normal" moment? I have been working my current job for about a year now. It's a reasonably chill job. Virtually no stress. I have no immediate supervisor. And I make my own schedule. My interaction with people is minimal. And yet every day, even after a year, I still get anxiety about getting up and going to work. After a ducking year. I relate to this so hard. The second I get to work I realize that I'm totally fine. I love the people and my job. I will have intense anxiety before almost every single workday. Especially the night before. It gets better sometimes. But it's always there. So frustrating. I've lost 2 jobs so far from this. Don't be like me. Overcome it. I threw away the best job I had because I was certain they didn't need me there and just stayed home. Come to find out nobody said anything negative when I was gone. Some guys wanted me to come back. That hit home. That's when I realized I'd made a huge mistake. So I called my now old boss a few weeks later and apologized for what I'd done and thanked them for all they taught me. I was there 9 months and I learned to take apart motors. Learned industrial sandblasting and did that for a few months. And one particular fella there took a shine to me and taught me how to drive a forklift when nobody was around. A guy let me rip sound the yard and pick shit up. Bring frames over for blasting. Speed down in open area to get a feel for the controls and steering and all that. Guy taught me the whole deal. And because of that chance someone took a high school dropout learned to operate a forklift. Shit was tight. I liked it for the freedom. I was always anxious to go to work but when I got there I felt so at ease. There was no pressure. No bosses over my shoulder. They bought us pizza and gave us properly sized company sweaters and coveralls. They really took care of us. And I let anxiety take over and I made a huge mistake. Be strong, folks. I couldn't stop crying. Everything felt awful and I thought about death more often than not. This year, I decided to try to quantify my mental health. I've cried on 19 separate days so far in 2020 and had some thoughts or other about suicide on 26. I'm coming out of a major depressive episode. I remember. Early on, I was filling out an intake questionnaire to see a psychiatrist and it asked me to check off all of the days in the past 2 weeks when I thought about death. How frequently I cried or felt like crying. How frequently I had no interest in doing things I used to enjoy. That sort of thing. I didn't even have to hesitate when checking off every day. It wasn't just every day. It was all day. For some reason. That really hit me. I knew I was depressed but I tend to minimize things. Like I'm always apologetic with doctors about coming in and trying to explain my meager symptoms that brought me in and hoping they won't feel like I'm wasting their time. That's how I felt about seeing the psychiatrist for depression. I wasn't even sure she would think my condition was bad enough to treat. And then I filled out the form and realized I couldn't even remember the last time I had had a whole day without all those thoughts that are the hallmark of depression. It was kind of a shock. I started tearing up just from filling out the form. Sometimes quantifying things can really open your eyes. I hope you are able to start to have more brighter days. Seeing it on paper, then seeing someone else take you seriously. That moment where you're not dismissed as being a waste of time or not a big enough problem. When I started crying over my math homework and the frustration that no matter how hard I tried to start doing it I just couldn't and there was a huge weight in my chest and I ended up hyperventilating and crying on my room's floor. Over 2 math problems. That weren't even mandatory. This hit me hard. When I was at my lower points I would get frustrated over math homework, then my mind will spiral and build up into a panic attack. Which lowers my mood again for a few days. I'm doing better mentally now. Understand math better after a few weeks of feeling happier and I'm switching to easier classes next year to ensure I'll be okay. Math is a beach. Mental problems are more of a beach. Good luck to you. When I was younger I had a really bad problem with this. There were more than I could nights growing up that I would break down crying at the kitchen table doing math problems for homework. Put a gun to my head and tell me to write the next great American novel and I could whip something up. but give me tough math problems that I didn't understand, and eventually the frustration. Feeling of being inadequate and fear of not finishing my homework crushed me. I also had the same problem with baseball. I was always good at baseball growing up. But if I struck out or hit a ball that resulted in an out, I would immediately have that swelling feeling in my chest and throat and I would break down. It was embarrassing for myself and parents because I was a 7 to 12-year-old boy with tears streaming down his face and choking up. I eventually outgrew it around 13. But it was around that time I began to accept personal failure way too easily. Feeling of dread every day for no reason most of the time. I realized that there were time periods where the choices and actions I made were not my own. Knowing myself. Knowing I'm not stupid or unhappy, and still finding myself reflecting on a lengthy period of time where someone who others, as well as myself, consider themselves fully capable and responsible for their own actions, could not find any reasonable explanation for my behavior over days, weeks, months, depending on how severely the episode impacted my life. Was the saddest day I've ever experienced. All I've ever had was my sanity throughout a chaotic youth. Losing that while maintaining cognizance was one of the hardest things I've dealt with. Dissociative disorder? I am severely bipolar, but I do dissociate a lot. It wasn't on my list of diagnoses, though. When I became really paranoid and hyper emotional, I felt as though I had totally lost control of my emotions. I felt like I didn't know what was real and who I could trust. That is 100% me. I have bipolar 1 disorder. Message me if you want. I'd love to chat. I have borderline personality disorder. I feel the same. Message me too, if you'd like. Kind of different, but I have severe ADHD. Like, and treated. I would be living in a box and or completely non-functional, and have been on lots of different treatment plans. Some were okay, some not at all. But the day I started my current plan, I took my med in the morning and about 20 minutes later my head was completely quiet. It's that feeling when you're in your house, doing whatever, and you notice the silence. And it feels weird. Like too quiet. I had that this is not normal thought. And then, is this how it for everyone else? I had to consciously choose what I was going to think about and focus on. Never, ever in my life have I held the remote for my own brain. Definitely did not feel normal, and I had learned how to think with a clear, linear, compartmentalized brain. Been 6 years now. And it's still the best treatment plan I've had. Even with 2 years of CBT training specifically for my severe ADHD. I'm currently looking into medication I have just not needed. I've read that a lot. I am intrigued by the idea of it. I mean, it's less severe. Way less severe. But I'm just used to my brain wandering off. I've had my private mind radio for months now and just recently even realized it. The idea is so weird, but intriguing. My husband has had that, but not as bad as you, I think. What is your current treatment plan, if you don't mind sharing? When I just could not get out of bed, just could not do it, for 10 days. Lost a new job because of that. But that was the wake up moment for me. After trying to beat back depression for years. I'm really pleased you were able to take it as a wake up moment. The whole not being able to get out of bed thing is so hard to explain to other people. But I get what you mean when you say you just couldn't do it. Cleaning a knife. I held it upwards at some point to look closer at a tiny speck and had this sudden urge to stab my eye with it. Still hurts to think of the effort it was to just put it down. I hope that was OCD. Because I understand how stupid those intrusive thoughts and urges can be. Same. I experience issues related to ADHD, anxiety, and intermittent depression. For ADHD, it was when I kept getting assignments in school I knew how to do, but felt completely unable to accomplish them. For anxiety, it's when as a kid I would get extreme stomach aches before going to bed due to my stress of not completing my homework, likely due to my ADHD, and wouldn't be able to stop my mind from racing, which in turn made my heart race. And it was a nightmare. Luckily I'm more aware of it now and can usually deal with it. For the depression, It's when I found myself hating everything I would normally do without thinking and looking for any distraction from dealing with the pain. I would also ignore all outside contact. Not get out of bed. Ignore basic cleanliness practices, like literally just throwing the pits of cherries onto the floor of my apartment since I didn't care. And then just not caring about myself at all. Like literally feeling like I was a burden to both myself and the people in my life. Edit. Missing letters. Your post really got to me. My son is 9 and we have been dealing with ADHD and anxiety for 3 years now. My ex is a drug addict. He started with abusing Adderall, so I was terrified to begin medicating my son. I put him in therapy for a year. Started a 504 plan at school and did everything I could to avoid medication. After a year it was unavoidable. He had to have medication. So he has been on Concerta for almost 2 years. He has become a different person. His grades are amazing and his anxiety has all but gone away. He has made more friends and has an easier time keeping friends. He even has a best friend now. I don't know what I mean to say here, but just reading your post is a confirmation to me that medication isn't bad or wrong for a young child. Thank you. I know we will make adjustments as he gets older too. I'm not as scared of meds as I used to be. The anxiety, yes, I understand. My son has remaining issues with some anxiety. The therapy gave him some coping mechanisms to deal with it, but it still surfaces sometimes. He deals with it now, but as he gets older I realize his stress levels will go up too. I hope I can recognize when it is beyond manageable for him. Or I hope he will tell me. We try to be very open about what is going on and I hope he understands he can come to me and we can work on things no matter what. I try to teach him that home is his safe place no matter where he is or what happens. When he is feeling overwhelmed. For now. He has his room and his comforting items and I try to teach him not to be embarrassed or ashamed about it. For example, he has a blanket that comforts him now. Something he had when he was very small. He doesn't want his friends to know he still has a blanket he loves. I just hope we can do the right things while he is growing up. Things to make him succeed. It's encouraging to read your story. I am glad you are doing well. I am glad to read that you control your meds. I try to accept that just because he has to take meds, it doesn't automatically mean addiction. He is somewhat aware of his father's issues. And I know these are my issues too. I don't make him aware of my concerns though. My memory is gone thanks to meningitis. But it was almost immediately after I woke up from a coma. The world looked different. I can't keep track of time correctly anymore, it all kind of blurs together in my head. Sometimes I just stop. Freeze up in the middle of doing something or talking, anywhere from a few seconds up to 13 minutes at the long end. Like someone hit the pause button, then I just go right back to what I was doing or saying, even if the person or people I was talking to has moved on. I'm conversation had just left and put a sticky note on the brim if my hat that they waited 3 minutes and had to go. Sorry. But the worst is the itch. From the day I woke up till now it feels like I have an itch inside my skull that I can't reach. Like my brain actually itches. That one takes the cake. Holy shit. Duck meningitis. How did you get it? And also, how did you first realize you had it? It came on so fast. Though it was swimmer's ear at first. The next day I was in a coma. Didn't know what it was till I woke up and the doctors told me. I fell in a hole with runoff that was contaminated with bacteria that got in my ear. I once thought I got a pretty fast heart rate whenever my doorbell would ring. Then I started cycling and I noticed how a heart rate of 200 BPM felt nothing like the doorbell feeling. The doorbell feeling felt way more intense and worse. So those were mini panic attacks. That realization really hit home. I held my baby as he cried and imagined dropping him onto an upturned knife in the dishwasher. PND is ducking awful. My sympathies. Really? After my first baby I imagined some really horrible things. Yes. She was hard, 17 hours a day screaming, kind of hard. But the guilt of even thinking those things as a parent mother is excruciating. I'm glad you got the diagnosis. I spent 10 years convinced there was a mistake and they shouldn't have let me take her home. Didn't figure out what it was until therapy for something else much later. My diagnosis only came when I went to my doctor for a lump in my breast. She checked me out and then asked me how I was. Because I didn't look good to her. It all came spilling out. It was the first time anyone had asked. And I didn't realize how bad it had got. I dread to think where I'd be now had she not noticed how I was. I realized I hadn't eaten anything in over a week because getting out of bed and going to the kitchen was too difficult. I'd been drinking out of the sink when I went to the bathroom. But I was still massively dehydrated. I ended up spending a week in a crisis unit where they diagnosed me with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. They got me on meds, which was helpful. It's still an uphill battle sometimes. This is weird. But I have PTSD for various reasons. But one cause of it was growing up with contaminated water. Even after I moved out as an adult, I used to only ever drink juice or milk or something, anything not water. After several years I am now able to drink water that is bottled or that I know is filtered. But never tap water. Just recently I went 2.5 days, maybe even 3, without drinking anything without really thinking of it. I drove 35 miles to school every day, dizzy and unfocused. Almost fainted a few times. And almost went to the hospital because I thought I had some hole in my stomach or something. It was just so full of acid. To the point where if I bent over I could easily regurgitate a little. I also only was peeing once a day. Maybe twice. After I realized my lack of fluid intake and freaked out over possibly having terminal dehydration, I drank bottles of water and Gatorade, and after a bit of fluids hit a point where I felt the thirstiest I have ever felt in my life. People with PTSD, anxiety, depression, etc. really gotta watch fluid and food intake. I legitimately didn't even realize I was at that point. Most likely it will be for a while. But keep on fighting. You're winning ground to get up the hill and be on top one day. When, at 10 years old, I looked at my mom while tying my shoes and say I want to die so bad. Holding knives against my heart at night before 12 years old. Wishing I was strong enough to do it. I had a horrific panic disorder. All day. Every day. Missing months of school and in and out of the hospital. I finally got diagnosed and treated. And while it hasn't been a perfect ride, I can proudly say that I haven't had a panic attack in years. And by 13 I was back at school and thriving. I'm 27 now. And so grateful to have gotten to where I am now. If you don't mind talking about it. How was the panic disorder manifesting in such a young age? The typical onset of it is around 20-25, so I'm curious if it's different in children, and also what are the thoughts when it begins? For me, 22-year-old, it's always the fear of losing control, of passing out, of having a seizure, stroke, heart attack, choking right in that moment. Anyway, keep up. You do good. I'm glad to hear it didn't take the best of you. Holy shit. Well done. I would hug you if I could, and you wanted to be hugged. Fun part of my autistic traits. I literally can't tell the difference between normal, sad, and depressed. I have no frame of reference for behavior that is normal and behavior caused by my mental disorders. How I feel you. When I was a teenager being medicated for depression, they kept asking me if the pills were working, and I'd just ask my mom if I seemed better. Thank heavens. I am not alone. Every time my psychologist asks this, I say honestly, I have no idea. The only thing I know that got better with the pills was my temper. But about all the rest, I'm completely lost. XD. When there were moments where, no matter what I was doing or thinking, my brain would just pop the thought of me drowning myself in there. I knew I was down. But when I has no control of that, and it just kept happening, over and over, I knew I had to get help. Depression is a sneaky bitch. I was getting pissed for literally no reason. Especially at the people important to me like my family or my boyfriend. When I was in this mood, I'd say and do everything to hurt them. The worst things that cut the deepest. Then I'd get sad and feel bad for them and myself because I didn't even know why I was behaving that way. I'm on meds now and I stopped behaving this way. I have full control over my anger and I don't get angry for no reason at all. And I don't use people's weaknesses against them. I was a shitty person. Welcome to the club, buddy. Anger issues are fucking awful. What is the cause of your anger issues? Mine is depression. Can I ask what meds you're taking? It was hard to realize how far I was gone. My mind wouldn't let me recognize that I can't ducking stop. I was deeply convinced that I could just snap out of it. I was too sick to realize how sick I was. I was at a point where I was severely bulimic. Would eat all day and only sleep for a few hours. Just to wake up and BP again. It took everything from me. My life shrinked into nothing but binging and purging. My weight was dropping. Every day and every idea of time became a blur, and I was so malnourished and sleep deprived that I started hearing voices and seeing shadow figures in the corner of my eye. It got to a point where I wouldn't react to my mum calling my name because I was convinced it wasn't real because I heard her calling me all the time. I still convinced myself that this wasn't too much of a deal somehow. It was when I was sent inpatient that I realized I couldn't not purge. Even if I tried, I couldn't even keep food down because I started vomiting automatically. Gross time, and somehow very scary to be confronted with the ugly truth that you haven't only lost control over your own actions but also didn't even notice this. I'm in a very similar situation. The pain of an ED can hurt so bad, but, in my experience, is not taken seriously. Especially bulimia. I have made myself go into depth with my BP. Glad you got help though. Stay strong, my friend. Being thrown into the back of an ambulance hours after doing a 3 AM grocery run in another state. With lots of other adventures in between. Story time. Manic adventures are some next level shit. Especially manic with psychosis adventures. When I was younger, my family always joked I had OCD. I never believed them until one day I spent 4 hours cleaning the blinds in my bedroom because I couldn't do anything else until they were done. My head just needed it to be done and makes my head feel all weird. I don't know how to explain it. So anyway, halfway through it kind of clicked that it wasn't normal to be unable to do anything until I'd cleaned for 4 hours. That was about 10 years ago. I got diagnosed with OCD last year. My OCD was like this. I could be gone all day and come home to clean for 6 hours. I would be half asleep but running off sheer anxiety. It had to get done. I would cry and clean because I couldn't stop. I also made ridiculous daily to-do lists. What normal people do in a week I would push myself to do in one day. If I didn't finish, I would punish myself. No food. No TV. Found a great doctor and got my meds balanced. For the most part. My mind is quiet now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.